You're listening to Theater and College Hoops. I'm Subi. Alongside me today, as always, partner in crime, Taylor Dammel. We're brought to you by Belly Up Media. Go download, subscribe, rate, and review us on whichever device it is that you use. Your college hooper of the day, Keaton Page, former point guard for Oklahoma State. I think a lot of folks, when they think of the small, undersized white point guard for Oklahoma State, they immediately go to Phil Forte, who is very good friends with Boston Celtics and Defensive Player of the Year Marcus Smart. But Phil Forte was able to run because of Keaton Page. Keaton Page came before Phil Forte there at Oklahoma State. And we'll touch on Oklahoma State troubling loss against West Virginia, a game they absolutely needed to have. So we'll talk to them. Maybe they could have used Keaton on the court tonight. Probably could have. But Keaton Page, he is your college hooper of the day. Check out the website at theaterandcollegehoops.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter at CBB Theater. You should also follow me at Subi232 to find out where the feet is, and make sure to follow Taylor at Taylor Dammel. Let's open the curtains. Big T back again. We are bearing down on March. Only a week or so left until we flip the calendar. And then, of course, we got championship week, conference tournaments, and I cannot wait for a lot of them. And then, of course, the NCAA tournament. How was your weekend? How's everything been?
Oh, it's good. I was just talking about how tired I was, but that's only not from anything exciting, only from golfing in the sun today. So I'll just keep rubbing that into any of our colder folks listening. But I actually want to announce already what our episode is going to be about next week, because you're bringing it up. It's almost March. Do you know that our Jerome episode is literally only like 4 days away? The A-Sun tournament starts in 6 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
I got to start planning that.
I thought that you would. Yeah. So here, those who are listening right now are listening to a live, in color, so to speak, pre-planning episode, because the Jerome episode is going to have to be a week from today, pretty much. So, yeah, or less than a week from today, or whatever. Next Monday and Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know that. I got to get the groundwork going. I got to hit up keeper of the Jerome, Brendan Brady O'Rourke. He is our guy, and we'll have to get going. Speaking of A-Sun, Kennesaw State, that is my team. I'm going to pick them. Although they did just lose, which isn't good. That's but fine. I mean, it's AQ no matter what.
You want them to, at least get with that last loss in before the tournament, so they're hungry. But going away from basketball for a second, I'm doing well, Sue. I appreciate you asking. Was there any excitement in your life over the weekend?
Baby stuff. I tweeted it out. I went and saw my niece, introduce myself, little meet and greet. It was a lot less formal than that. It was great seeing her, my brother's baby, back home. And I also was able to spend some time, break some bread with the shark. We got far too drunk on Saturday night, but it was a lot of fun. We ended up watching maybe the first 5 minutes of season 1, episode 1 of White Lotus, and then also maybe 5 minutes of New Girl. We also put on Along Came Polly. It was that kind of night. It was just really stupid stuff. And I think our significant others were tired of it. But then the next day, actually, this is something that'll make you laugh, I think, Taylor. We got brunch, and look, I'm just going to come out and say it. We couldn't hold it anymore. We both had to poop at brunch while the wives had to hold down the bar seating. And then we emerged from the bathroom only to find a line that's like 5 deep. So I don't know if I can go back to this establishment again, and I don't want to disclose it, but that's pretty much how our time was spent. So it was very wholesome and great with my niece. And then I just reverted into a vile monster Saturday night and Sunday.
So other than like the alcohol portion of this, we could have taken this weekend from like Shark Soup 1997, and it would have been like the same exact weekend, is what you're saying. Like watching like Along Came Polly and then clogging a bathroom New Year you. Like that you could have pointed any point in time, probably in your history, and taken that. So that's nice. I like that you guys can revert to that. Did you give Shark any shit for Arizona beating Tennessee this time at baseball this weekend?
Slight amount. I know we talked about it right after Arizona beat Tennessee in basketball, but I did just let them know, like, hey, before we go any further, before we really catch up, just take a look at my latest retweet. It was Arizona Athletics basically saying, oh, damn, we did it again in baseball. But I did say, hey, February 16th is going to be something that we have to circle the calendar for.
I'm a little disappointed I didn't go, considering it was in Scottsdale, like 5 minutes from my house. But I did have to text our another Tennessee buddy, Cody Crutcher, friend of the program, and say, "Hey, Arizona's just really good at beating Tennessee this year, huh?" And I got a prompt "fuck off" in response from that. So that was pretty on brand, which I liked.
Well, they were ranked like 2 in the country, right? Tennessee?
Were
Yeah, exactly. That's good. So let's dive in, though, to the playbill here, Taylor. We got a lot to catch up on from not only last night, but this past weekend. Can I start first by saying that I'm a little disgusted with Oklahoma State and their performance against West Virginia? I've long been saying that there's 3 teams in the Big 12 that I think are actually pretty terrible. And that's West Virginia, that's Oklahoma, and that's Oklahoma State. Now, Oklahoma had their best win of the year is drubbing against Bama, but they also forced Texas to overtime. Oklahoma State, I think, is the best of those 3 teams. And then West Virginia comes and dominates them. And now I think Lunardi has West Virginia, despite the fact that they're 16-12, mind numbing that I think he has them in as the last 4 in. That's, to me, I'd rather see another team from a different conference. I understand the Big 12 is really good, but I'd rather see another bubble team get in over West Virginia because I think that ship has sailed. But for Oklahoma State, I thought their season largely rested on this game because I think they got a tough last few games. I think they still play Baylor. I think they play a red hot Tech team. Oklahoma State's in some trouble now that they lost and dropped this one to West Virginia. What say you?
so. I'm going to push back a little bit on you on West Virginia not being a tournament team. I don't love them either. That's not what I'm trying to say. But, when we get to this end of the bubble type of situation, there's always like well, who would you rather have in type of question? And it's like, okay, so what,
I think I'd rather like a Charleston in, honestly.
Okay, fine. I guess my example was going to be a team like a neutral court. If Clemson and West Virginia played today, like who's winning that game? Even if you say Clemson majority of the time, it's probably only like 60-40, right? And Clemson's well within the tournament at this point, even though they suffered. Yeah, maybe they're not.
They are.
Given the fact that they just lost to god-awful Louisville this last week. But I mean, I guess that's kind of my point. Is a team that just lost to the worst team in college basketball is most likely in the tournament, but you're still not even necessarily taking them over West Virginia. West Virginia and Texas Tech have become quite similar. So I don't even say this jokingly, 2 of the hottest teams in the country, Texas Tech. But no, Oklahoma State, really, West Virginia is not hot. They lost 3 of their last 4, but including the Texas Tech. But Oklahoma State is a little underwhelming at this point. They kind of had it all right there in front of them, kind of like you were alluding to. And then they just get trucked at West Virginia. They've lost 3 in a row. Albeit Kansas and TCU, like you said, they're hanging on to that Iowa State and TCU victory from early February. I am a little surprised that Lunardi has Okie State and West Virginia flipped, but I kind of like if his reasoning is head to head. Well, that just happened, and we just saw that, so I do like that aspect of it. But I'm with you as it relates to like maybe a team like a Charleston getting in. But I think the question here, and we might differ on this though, is I guess kind of like what I said about the ACC. Like if West Virginia wasn't in the hardest conference in the country, would they be 500? I mean, would they beat? Because you look at like the ACC standings, and it's like, okay, even North Carolina, who is garbage, is 500 in the ACC. So I would still rather have like a Charleston in, but I could see why West Virginia would get it at this point, or an Oklahoma State, just given the fact that they're going to ride the coattails of the Big 12, and that's just kind of what happens when you're in the best conference in the country.
Yeah, I understand the reality of it, but at some point, these losses that have piled up have to come back and bite you in the ass. You have 12 losses and it's not March yet. I, I mean, look, if they end the season with that amount of losses and maybe win a couple or 13 losses, right? You'd assume they're not going to win the Big 12 tournament. Then yeah, sure, we can have that discussion. I still think they have a ton of work to do though. And I look at a team like Oklahoma State, who is on the heels of a tournament ban. I just think that they're playing with their food. The Big 12 is a difficult conference, but when you have opportunities presented to you, like playing West Virginia, and I understand Tech is hot, but you should be able to beat them. It, they're a team that can ride the coattails of the Big 12 and get in my estimation. But right now, they're just playing with their food. And Mike Boynton, I think he's got to at some point turn that corner and drive it home that Oklahoma State is going to lock in as a tournament team. So I'm a little concerned with their performance, especially against West Virginia. Another team, maybe I'm just spitballing here, Taylor, and thinking out loud. I'd rather see a Seton Hall in over a West Virginia potentially, and they have somewhat similar records. I understand it's again you got to look at the conference, but there's just some other teams that I think have performed a little bit more consistently and consistently well because it goes back to your point of who I understand the schedule's tough, but don't we have to at some point value winning those games?
Yeah, and I say that all the time, right? Like you don't get credit for losing big games. So I guess I can't push back on what I say all the time, but I guess at the same time, we just lost or we just watched TCU lose to Kansas, right? So that puts TCU under 500 in the Big 12 this year. That's a really good indicator on actually how good that conference is. I hate to say that like, yeah, obviously you have to win games, but TCU, who has been shown this year that they are a very good team this year, even they're under 500 in that conference. So it's a little tough. It's a lot of like how I think about when UCLA fans talk about wanting to get a 1 seed, right? It's like, well, you've only beaten one team that's projected to make the tournament. So you've lost some games against tournament teams, but yeah, again, I guess I'm going to your point here where it's like, yeah, someone's got to win these games to get into the tournament, but then that brings up the discussion about what is bracketology in the sense that is this, if the season ended today, is this where we're standing, or is this a projection towards who's actually making the tournament in 2 weeks? Some bracketologies are different than others, whatever. We don't have to go into that because that's another 2-hour long discussion, but there's a little bit of debate to be had there too, where it's like, okay, maybe we're projecting West Virginia does win 3 more games down the stretch. And so maybe that's where you were going with that, but there's a little bit of side discussion to be had about that as well.
I think that's a great point, and I think we just need to change the phrasing, maybe. And I don't know, as an English major, that's what's really pissing me off at this point is that we're saying West Virginia. I don't know, maybe you do see that, or the numbers say that and indicate that West Virginia is going to win the next few games, maybe a game or two in the Big 12 tournament. Then yeah, I'd say absolutely get West Virginia in there. Texas Tech has that opportunity. Oklahoma State could still salvage some things. And again, I'm okay with giving the benefit of the doubt to some of these teams, but can we at least say like Oklahoma's dead? I think Oklahoma's completely dead, but I don't necessarily see a huge difference between an Oklahoma and a West Virginia, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if you have their records pulled up. I think Oklahoma is sub 500, but they have more impressive wins in my estimation. And it's not going to end up mattering because they've lost too many games. And I feel like West Virginia isn't going to win out the rest of the way or before the conference tournament. I think they're going to slip up. Taylor, you even said that they've lost 3 of their last 4 or something along those lines. I don't see the Mountaineers getting in just with the way that they're playing.
So you know what this means, right? This means that they're almost a lock.
Sweet 16.
Sweet 16. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I'd be okay with that because I love Hug.
I know. I'm glad you said it though, because that's exactly what happens. We'll sit here and we'll talk about like a West Virginia or Okie State, a USC, whatever, for the next 3 weeks on every single episode, and we'll agree that none of them should get in, and they're garbage and they're trash, and then they'll beat like a 3 seed to go to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I'm happy to be incorrect on this one because I do love Huggy, but I don't know. I think there are far more deserving teams that I'd like to see, despite the fact that they play in inferior conferences. But again, this was about Oklahoma State blowing a golden opportunity, because opportunities are going to be few and far between as we approach conference tournament time, Taylor. And it's been crunch town. I think we had basically said once February hits, you need to be playing your best basketball. And we're now a week after Valentine's Day. Teams really need to start playing do or die postseason basketball. I think even no matter what team you're on, whether you're a Kansas, because you're probably playing for a number one overall seed, whether you're a UCLA, like you had mentioned, where their inspiration is getting to that one seed line, or a team that's fighting for seeding, and the difference between a 6 and a 4 is huge. Then, of course, your bubble teams. You referenced Carolina. Carolina's the one team that it's postseason hoop right now, man. You got to get going ASAP. So Oklahoma State, that bell has been rung. You got to get going too.
Are we quickly approaching already a Kevin Ollie situation in North Carolina, by the way? I mean, similar kind of arc here. What a bad team they are. Sorry, I'm getting out of order here, but man, I mean, they're just horrible.
I don't know if we're going to see this as a Kevin Ollie type of situation, but I think a lot of folks did get fooled based off of their tournament run. I never subscribed to them being number one overall. I think I kept saying Houston should have been.
Well, and UNC was in this situation last year too. They kind of had to do this all the way into the tournament last year, if I remember correctly as well, or at least down the stretch. So, it's weird because Armando Bacot is like the best rebounder in the history of basketball, and it means nothing to them. But anyway, we could get back on track here.
No, I'm glad you brought up Bacot, because I think just a few of life's greatest mysteries. Where is Jimmy Hoffa buried? Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and why are RJ Davis and Caleb Love shooting so much more than Armando Bacot? I mean, those to me are life's greatest mysteries, but could be wrong. But Oklahoma State, let's see how they rebound. And I'm sorry to any Nears fans out there, but I don't need to see the Mountaineers in the tournament unless, of course, you show me something here moving forward. Another game that wrapped up last night, it was the big one from Monday night. Kansas traveling to TCU. I thought TCU was going to complete the sweep over Kansas. They dominated them in Lawrence, and then Kansas gets retribution in Fort Worth. Mike Miles is back. He destroyed and helped destroy Oklahoma State on Saturday, but Kansas, what a machine they are right now. And I'm seeing there's a lot to unpack from this game and this program and the season that Kansas is having, Taylor. We'll start with the game itself. What were some of the things that you saw?
I think my biggest disappointment was how TCU played down the stretch. Those were 3 or 4 of the worst consecutive possessions I've seen in a college basketball game as of late. I mean, it was a 5-point game, and they got, correct me if I'm wrong, like 4 or 5 stops in a row, and only got a bucket out of those 4 or 5 stops, and no offense. I don't even know it was just like, hey, Mike Miles, here's 30 seconds. And then they ended the first possession with like a airballed layup. The second one with like a jump ball, held ball situation. The third one with an absolutely randomly jacked 3 from like 40 feet out. I don't think a single pass was put together in these possessions. So they were right there. Like TC was right there. I don't want to say it's necessarily indicative of anything, but with Mike Miles being back, do they just say, hey, go ahead, Mike, do whatever you want? We need to see a little bit more of this down the stretch, but that's kind of what it felt like to me. I was on TCU side of this one as well. I thought they were going to pull it off at home, especially after Max Duggan walks in with his tux on, sits courtside. Hold on, answer me this question before I move on here or move along. Did it seem like kind of dead in there for a 5-point game with Kansas at home? Was that just me? Like, did I have my volume turned down? It seemed like it was like a Sunday matinee in there.
So there were a couple things that you talked about just now that I thought were super subtle, but maybe they weren't. Number one was the end of game situation from TCU, and then you also brought up the Mike Miles situation. I'll talk to that in a second, and then also the volume on the crowd. I think ESPN seriously muted the TCU crowd because there were a couple big plays where it sounded like a church, and I was really upset. And I'm here thinking to myself, guys, this is a huge matchup. This is like what did I say just a few minutes ago? Teams are going to be treating almost every game from here on out as a postseason type of performance. Like I said, Kansas has number one overall seeding implications, and they want revenge. But Taylor, I think the game was, I think that like the production crew or something really muted the crowd. I don't think the crowd was bad.
Okay, I'm glad you noticed that too, because I was like literally sitting here like this can't be. This has to be more exciting, right? This is number 3 Kansas at home, but kind of going back to not only just the end of game situations, but pretty much the last half, pretty much from the under 8 timeout. In the last 7 minutes and 18 seconds, TCU only scored 5 points. That's not going to win a lot of games against anybody, let alone Kansas or anybody else at the top half of the Big 12 or anybody in the tournament. That's for sure. So that was kind of my big takeaway of the game. Secondly, being, as we've talked about since Along Came Polly came out, pretty much is, again, Kansas just gets this shit done in these type of situations every single year. And it's not like, I'm not trying to throw out a hard take or just some kind of, oh, you don't need an expert to know that. Well, it's true though. Like they just keep doing what they do. And the funny part, I'm sure you'll enjoy this, Subi, or any of our other listeners. So last week we harped on, analysts just now finally getting into college basketball, and fans too. Same thing, And so had a friend text me today, hey man, this TCU Kansas game, like definitely feeling Kansas. And I'm like, well, actually, I'm kind of feeling TCU, like, Mike Miles, David Baugh, Eddie Lampkin. They were tough last year, if you remember. This year they got a great home court advantage, beat Kansas the first time, whatever, they're favored. And so then what goes ahead and happens? Just Kansas just wins. And the guy who hasn't watched a college basketball game since the tournament last year was like, well, yeah, dude, well, if it's Kansas, why wouldn't they have won? And you just think to yourself, like, God, I am just a fucking idiot for putting this much time and effort into this dumb sport.
Aren't you supposed to be the expert, man? I just tuned in and I could tell you that Kansas was going to beat TCU. Yeah, it is about to be that time of year. And I've said it a million times. My wife consistently finishes higher in the bracket pool than me. She placed last year 3rd. So I'm excited to see what useless team she takes. Actually, she's probably going to take West Virginia to the Elite 8, and it's just all going to completely blow up in my face. Unless it doesn't, which means she gets a nice payout from it, and then that goes into both of our pockets. But you're right, Taylor. This is what Kansas does. And I was texting the guys. I was saying to myself, and I tweeted this. I was like, TCU needs to make a run. It was around the 10-minute mark. I said they need to make a run where they go up by 3 or are at the very least tied, because this game was played between Kansas 3 to 5 point advantage for majority of it. And it was the least threatening, let's say, I don't know if it's the advantage or deficit. What I'm trying to say is at no point did I seriously think that TCU could come back from a 3 to 5 point deficit. Right. I kept saying if it stays at this level, if it stays max 2 possession game, like 5 points, that's nothing for Kansas. They can easily grind you down and salt that game away. You got to put some sort of pressure on them. TCU never really did that. And it's not TCU's fault. They're a great team. But what I also did see in the last couple of those possessions, Taylor, that you mentioned, was a bit of hero ball from Mike Miles. And I don't want that to be the case, because they've gotten to this point. They've built this program on the backs of sharing the basketball, being tough as hell. And yeah, when you need some heroics from Mike Miles, he can give it to you. But I didn't necessarily think that they needed it at that point. I think you can still get a good look for Chuck O'Bannon. I think Damian Baugh is a terrific player. I don't know if you necessarily want to go to Lampkin down low as a number one option, but involve him in the offense. A lot of it just seemed way too isolation for Mike Miles, and I think he's still a little jacked up on his return, which I can't really blame him. He missed a ton of time, and I think he's even been quoted as saying, "I thought that injury against Mississippi State was going to end the season for me." So it's going to take him some time to get back involved, but I did see a lot of hero ball there. But regarding this game, I've seen this so many times, Taylor, and we make picks. We make incorrect picks all the time. And I thought TCU was going to win this game, but with about 10 minutes left, when it was a 5-point game, I was like, look, if TCU doesn't go on a 7-8-0 run, this one's a wrap. And Kansas is never going to allow that to happen, Taylor. They're never going to allow you to go on a crazy run. Or it doesn't seem like that at this juncture of the season. And so for me, when you said TCU got those 5 stops and they only got 1 bucket, I was thinking to myself, I don't know why. I was just scrolling on my phone the whole time. I didn't expect TCU to actually win that game.
Yeah, I think part of the problem too is both with the expectation of them winning down the stretch and also needing them to make a run. Both of those things are hindered by the fact that they just can't shoot from the outside. I'm not saying that you have to shoot for threes to go on a run, but if you're trying to make a comeback or, a momentum shifting type of run, Damian Baugh shoots 28% from 3. Mike Miles shoots 31%. As a team, they shoot 29%. Ugh, that's horrible. That's near dead last in all of college basketball. So I'm not saying that they can't win games without that, because clearly they've been good and clearly they scored 100 points on Saturday, I believe. So they can score the basketball. The problem is when you get into a tournament situation or a situation like you were here last night with Kansas, it's like, well, if you're only relying on getting to the rim and you're playing bigger, more athletic teams and you can't shoot, this is a bad combination for the tournament. So Mike Miles, if they're going to go anywhere in the tournament, it's going to have to be one of those guys, Baugh or Miles or someone, is going to have to go on a Sam Decker type of run, shooting the ball in the tournament. Just someone who shot 30% all year and then goes like 6 of 8 in a game in the tournament. Because I just am a little worried that they aren't dynamic. They don't have enough options on offense to spread a good team out defensively.
This was a conversation that the Shark and I actually had when we were in person, because Kansas, again, this is a perfect example of why you don't freak out when they lose 3 straight, which is what happened this season. I feel like people have already forgotten about that despite how they reacted to it. Kansas lost 3 straight this season, and now they're in line for the number 1 overall seed, which I think they have a pretty decent grasp on at this point. But the Shark and I were talking about it. We said, could they repeat? I don't think they will repeat, just because the tournament is that insane and they're susceptible of getting picked off. We've actually seen it, right? I referenced those 3 straight losses. There is a bit of a blueprint, but what Bill Self has done is nothing short of remarkable. I genuinely think he's one of the best, if not the best coach of our generation. I think I'm okay going there. Maybe you could argue with Coach K and what generation he belongs to, actually. Maybe even a Roy Williams. But, man, Bill Self is – Jay Wright, I think that's fair as well. But, man, Bill Self just churns it out. The amount of conference titles that he owns and the way he runs that conference. You look at a team like Baylor, who's vying for Big 12 supremacy, and they've been great. They have a national title. They've been really great the last couple of years. It's still kind of a footnote into the Kansas dynasty. And here Kansas is with a convincing win against Baylor, bearing in on another Big 12 title and the number 1 overall seed. I mean, I know it's voter fatigue. I feel bad for a guy like Jerome Tang, who's done an amazing job. And he's probably saying to himself, how the hell is Bill Self doing this yet again after losing 2 first-rounders, Remy Martin, who was a catalyst for the national title in the national title game, and David McCormick?
I'm glad you brought up Baylor too, because Baylor, and this is not anti-Baylor, but they are just small potatoes in comparison, and they literally just won a national championship.
And those are some of the tastiest potatoes you'll have, but they are small.
If they were in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten or whatever, they would fill up every single arena every single night. Here we go. And Big Ten, I say that very specifically because it's not like when's their last national championship?
Michigan State.
Michigan State 2000, right? So it's not like they're that far ahead of the Pac-12 and that. But yeah, you have a national champion that comes in. Whoo, it's big time, except for in the Big 12, because it's like, they're not even as big as Kansas. And that's really unfortunate. I mean, yeah, even look at K-State was ranked ahead of Kansas for a decently long stretch. And
beat them.
Nobody gave a shit.
Beat them head to head. It's like, none of it really matters.
Well, and you talk about that Kansas stretch, they easily could have lost 5 in a row in that stretch. They'd only beat Iowa State by 2 the game before the bad stretch, and they only beat Oklahoma by like 4 before that. So, I mean, that was a bad stretch of basketball. I'd love to see a stat, if it exists, about if a team has ever gotten the number 1 overall seed after having a 3-game losing streak within a year. That'd be a very interesting stat. Again, I keep talking about our crack research staff that needs to do this. So I just need to take notes and do this every week, that I come up with a random fact that I forget about. So I'll try and remember that one, but that would be a good one. There can't be that many overall number 1 seeds that have had even 3 or more losses, really, maybe 5 at most. So having one that lost 3 in the same year can't have happened more than at least maybe at most one other time, I would guess.
I think there's definitely some stats out there that we want to take a look at as it pertains to the number 1 overall ranking and coming in for tournament teams, like with Carolina, and also obviously what you had mentioned with Kansas, and just that Baylor point. I agree with you. I'm not trying to rain on their parade, because they're amazing too. And Keontae George is a blast, but it's just Kansas, they just laugh at you at that point. Is there another program that you're less worried about than Kansas? I'm trying to think. I mean, even like if Jay Wright was still at Villanova, they'd be up there. I wouldn't be worried about them whatsoever. But and Baylor is certainly up there.
But the thing with all these other teams in all these other conferences, like a Duke, like a Nova, like a whatever, Kansas is still more consistent than all of them because they just win the conference every single damn year. Except for
Duke doesn't even win the ACC, do they?
Duke has only won the ACC once in the last 15 years. So, yeah, I mean, that shows you how, and this isn't supposed to be anti-Duke either, but it just shows you how Kansas is really kind of an upper echelon compared to everybody else right now. Just their overwhelming consistency year in and year out. And I know they won the national championship. They've been on this pedestal. I know, but just I think it's kind of an undervalued thing that, like you said, it's voter fatigue, where it's like, whatever. Yeah, Kansas will just win the Big 12 again, and we'll just move on. And people, I don't think, really are appreciating the fact that, like we said, Duke's won 1 conference title in the last 15 years. Arizona's won 7, I think, in that same time span, which is really incredible. Honestly, it is, but it's just nobody even cares, because Kansas only 15 in a row, and then they lost 1, and now they'll just start another streak of 15 in a row.
Just an incredible model of consistency, and the players that self churns out. You look at a guy like Jalen Wilson, who's having an all-conference season. Actually, Mike Miles, and again, this is no disrespect to Mike Miles, but Mike Miles was picked preseason Big 12 Player of the Year. It's almost assuredly going to Jalen Wilson at this point now. And look, Miles was hurt. That plays a huge role into it. And who knows how this race would have fared. But you get a guy like Jalen Wilson, and then KJ Adams is contributing as well. DeJuan Harris, who I've been all in on since the beginning of last year, actually. He may not give you a lot of points, but he's the perfect college basketball point guard. Grady Dick, who's been emerging and caught fire early in the first half. He's been a lot of fun, which I think a lot of people knew about Grady Dick coming in. But I want to say the only thing that's stopping me from saying, Kansas can repeat is, college basketball is crazy and the tournament's crazy. Like, that's the only thing. And also, do I really view them as a Florida? Shit, maybe. Maybe I should be viewing them as a Florida.
It's going to be the worst part about March Madness too, is how many Grady Dick jokes there are going to be that we played out 5 months ago, 6 months ago. You already know that on Twitter, people are going to be like, "Oh, whatever," and
I love Dick.
yeah, it's like, okay, this has been a 6-month long thing. So not to add negativity to this, but I'm already sure. I can't wait for that text from someone. Be like, oh, you know about this guy on Kansas, the last name? Like, yeah, I've watched 30 of his games this year. I will be that dickhead gatekeep. Like, I'm gatekeeping college basketball, right?
I'm all right with that. I'm all right.
Oh
with
yeah,
that.
did you hear this new song? Yeah, I heard it when it came out a year ago. Yeah, I know. Sound like a dickhead, but I don't care.
Is that a pun? See, that was clever.
It wasn't even supposed to be. Yeah,
that was.
But
clever,
we're gonna hear it 150,000 fucking times during the tournament, though.
I'm sure. Hey, let's stay in the Big 12 now, though. Texas Tech on a bit of a roll here, Taylor. They've won their last 3. They have beat Kansas State at home, beat Texas at home, and then they also beat West Virginia. Tech ends with Oklahoma, very much a winnable game, although that's on the road. At home against TCU, the way they've been playing, Tech that is, they could definitely win that game. And then they travel to Kansas. That's going to be a loss for sure. Sorry. But Texas Tech could absolutely be on a 5-game winning streak before they head to Kansas. And then who do they end up with? And then they host Oklahoma State. The only loss I'm seeing there potentially, if they continue to play the way they're playing, is for sure Kansas in Lawrence. But Texas Tech, I mean, last week we were talking about some different teams falling on the road and how difficult, especially this season. There is a stat that backs it up, that this season has been very difficult for top 15 teams to win on the road. And we were joking about Texas, like, oh, is that a bad loss for Texas Tech as it was happening? And we said, well, look, Texas is going to be fine, but who knows? Maybe Tech's turning the corner a little bit. They've certainly turned the corner now, and they have a very favorable schedule towards the end of the season here. Any chance the Red Raiders pull off something crazy and bring themselves up from the dead, get into the tournament, Taylor?
Well, if West Virginia is projected to be in, if Texas Tech wins 3 of their last 4, 4 of their last 5, 1 or 2 in the Big 12 tournament, why wouldn't they be in over a West Virginia or an Oklahoma State? I mean, God forbid they actually beat Kansas, then they might as well be in. But as we just discussed, wax poetically for the last 15 minutes, that's probably not going to happen because of Kansas can't beat them at this point. They're going to go undefeated for the rest of the year. If you listen to the last 10 minutes of this program. But yeah, I mean, what a funny program Texas Tech is, and what a crazy funny year that they've had. Just dead in the water, worst team in the Big 12, and then all of a sudden we're just here talking about them potentially making the tournament, being really one of the hotter teams in the country. You've got Devion Harmon. He scored 25 against Texas last week. Who's their leading scorer? Kevin Obenar. Is that how you say his last name? Or Banner?
Banner.
Yeah. I like Obenar. Not enough N's in there to be Obanner, but he's playing well as well. I don't think is Pop Isaac still hurt?
He was last week. They beat Texas without him.
Right. Wonderful name. Love the name Pop Isaacs. But yeah, I mean, I guess what we'll need to know from Texas Tech, is this a flash in the pan, like Kansas's 3 losses were a flash in the pan, or is this a good a sustainable, a long roast, let's call it? Like, can they win 1 or 2 more? If they win the next 2 games, then they'll be all on the bubble for sure, and they will be the talk of inside college basketball for any college basketball nerd that watches CBS Sports until 1 a.m. Eastern. They'll definitely have a lot of segments on Texas Tech in the next 10 days if they can get past TCU and Oklahoma was their next game, correct?
Yeah,
winnable. I mean, they're winning that game.
They very well could.
I'm saying they're going. I'm guaranteeing it.
All right,
here.
I mean, Oklahoma's only favored by 2.5 early there, so. They're a fascinating program right now. The last 2 years, Mark Adams takes over, and they make it to the Sweet 16. A lot of people forget that they played Duke very well. That was one of the better games of the tournament, and Paolo Banchero just said, "Screw it, I'm the best player on this court," and propelled Duke eventually to the Final Four. But I remember picking that game in my bracket. I had Texas Tech winning that game, and it was a very close one. And so then you come back this year, you're supposed to get Amick in the transfer portal from Utah Valley, and he's hurt to begin the season. And I think that actually is going to be something that we look back on if they don't make the tournament. That's really going to stick in my craw, because if Fardaws Amick is 100% healthy, Tech is in the tournament. They're in the field. He's just now getting his groove a little bit. And then Mark Adams had to play a little bit of the roster control role, I suppose. And that's one of the many hats that you wear as a coach. But I'm wondering if it's just it's too little too late. And the opportunity might still be there, but because of how poorly they started, especially in Big 12 play, I think they started 0-8. And so at this point now, you pretty much have to put all the coal in the engine and say, and this is what I referenced earlier, this is now win or go home every single game for Texas Tech. Probably up until maybe halfway through the Big 12 tournament. I don't know if they win their next like 5-6 games, they might be in, but I don't know if I necessarily see that happening with the competition. We also mentioned the Kansas game. So I think Tech right now is playing with Tech is the best example, Taylor, of a team. If you want to look at a team and model what you need to do, if you're like a Clemson, if you're a Seton Hall, if you're one of these bubble teams, look at Texas Tech, because they're playing with their butt hair on fire right now.
Well, and just for a couple of those guys, they have to, in the sense that like their three best players are seniors. So this is going to be tough. If they can't make a run here, I'm not sure how good Texas Tech is going to be for the next year or two, relying on the likes of like Daniel Bacho and those type of guys, former Arizona recruit Daniel Bacho. But yeah, O'Banner, Amick, and who else was I forgetting
Harmon.
there? Oh, Devion Harmon. They're all
Harmon,
seniors. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be this big rah moment that we see on TV shows or whatever. But if there's any time, it's like, yo, guys, this is quite literally your last run. So let her fly.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I look at Mark Adams and a Hubert Davis almost in the same light. I think Mark Adams has been a longtime assistant. We'll see what they can do with their own rosters moving forward. But both of those teams, in my opinion, right now on the outside looking in, which kind of stinks. I'm not going to be. I'm not going to hide it at all. Okay, I want to see a UNC in. There's teams in every sport that you might hate, but they kind of need to be in order for the tournament, in my estimation, to be as fun as it should be. And not having UNC in would stink. And I would be totally fine if UNC ends up getting in just based off brand recognition. Whatever. I'm going to be the first one to say it. So Texas Tech, let's see if they can continue this role. Taylor, real quick before we get to some winners, UConn and Providence coming up this week. Two of the most toxic fan bases, especially when those two play each other. Providence won at the AMP earlier this season. I think they had a lot of foul shots. And of course, the PC fan base is saying, well, that's because we're stronger and more aggressive than you. UConn fan base is saying, well, no, that's BS. You got the benefit of the doubt and you got much better calls. UConn PC, I said a couple of weeks ago that I'm looking ahead at this schedule, and I think UConn has a great chance of finishing the season white hot, not just hot, white hot. And I think a lot of folks have kind of just thrown them away to the wayside, forgetting how dominant they were earlier in the season. I've always said that I think they've shown that potential. They've also shown potential to absolutely stink, but I think they get the job done at home against Providence. They had a good tune-up game against Seton Hall and took care of business. Thoughts on this upcoming UConn PC game?
I kind of love this Providence team. We talked about it last week a little bit after the was it the Marquette game? No, against the what was the game that went to double overtime last week? Providence. Creighton. Yeah, right. But George,
yeah, real quick, UConn beat Marquette, by the way.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Continue.
So yeah, sorry. The best maybe the best. Would you say this is the best conference race we have left over the last week here? Right, it's got to be.
I think so.
Yeah, the Mountain West is pretty close as well. But in terms of the number of teams that are available to win this, I mean, UConn if UConn wants to win it, they have to beat Providence at this point. There's not enough games left. But yeah, you've got 4 teams within 1 game of the lead, Marquette being number 1. I know that the metrics really have UConn favored in this game, like significantly, but there's something about Providence that I just feel like they're just not getting enough credit for, maybe as good as they have been recently. You know, I can't put my finger on potentially why, and maybe it's more so that I don't love UConn. I'm in that boat of, you know, they were dominant early in the year, but I think they've let me down a little more than they've let you down. I would love to see Providence with an upset here. I simply don't love this UConn team, and I really don't know why. Maybe it's the Hurley factor. Maybe I can't emotionally get over that. I think maybe Sonogo just doesn't do it as much for me, but I'm definitely not as high on them now as I was early in the year. And they, you know, we talk about them having a potential to finish the year white hot. They also have the potential to finish the year with a losing conference record, though, as well. So, I mean, you're looking at the positivity side of that. I appreciate that, but there is, I don't want to say an equal opportunity, but if they lose to Providence, I don't know, that game at the end of the year against Nova could be sneaky on the road. Yeah, I'm rolling with Providence on this matchup. I just think that there's something about, I think they have that it factor. We're big Cooley guys on this program, despite what the naysayers on Twitter say about this program as it relates to Providence basketball. But you notice the teams that we actually kind of support the most are our biggest like haters on Twitter. We've been singing like Tennessee praise all year. We've been singing Providence praise. Like,
both of those fan bases have insane inferiority complexes. They expect you to love them every 2 seconds, and the second you point out any sort of flaw or area for improvement, it's just a tire fire at that point.
Tennessee's out here scoring less points than like a middle school girls basketball game, and we're like, no, they're still good. Yeah, don't listen to that. They're still going to be good. They're still a favorite. We're out here
that's because
trying to boost them up.
That's because we have our theory on Tennessee. It's the once every 6 game theory. All right. And so we got to see how that stacks up. But I agree with you on Providence. I think they'll cover no matter what the line is. Providence is going to cover because I'm assuming UConn is going to be favored. This is going to be a huge bounce back game and bounce back opportunity, though, for a Adama Sanogo and also an Andre Jackson. I don't think either of those guys were particularly good, especially Sanogo. And this was at the height, the euphoric height of Bryce Hopkins. Bryce Hopkins, I don't want to say he's necessarily tailed off, but he hasn't been playing at that insane level, which had him as clear-cut Big East Player of the Year. And he might still win that award. But what's funny with Providence is another guy has kind of emerged as one of their most important pieces, and that's Devin Carter. He is an absolute dog defensively, and I love him. And he's going to be the reason they win some games in the conference tournament and also in the NCAA tournament. I just think that UConn is going to be super juiced up for this game. I think they understand that right now Providence is, well, the past couple of years, been the class of the two of those programs. UConn's always had, I want to get my mind into the fan base where they're like, no, Providence is the little brother. We don't care about them. I don't think you can keep BSing your way through this. You care about Providence right now. They are here and they've kind of played well against you. All right. And they're the ones that have won an NCAA tournament game and gotten to the Sweet 16 and played Kansas really well. So I think UConn has a lot to prove. I think they're going to come out fired up for that. But anytime we think Providence is going to get blown out, that just doesn't happen. Save for the St. John's game, which sometimes you just can't offer an explanation. I don't know why they lost like that on the road to St. John's, but that's not who they are. So I'm expecting a battle here, but I do expect UConn to win this and then parlay that into a really nice finish for the end of the season for them.
You know, Sue, one of my favorite things that you do, even though you're non-better, is the amount of times that you mix in the word parlay appropriately into the program. As a non-better, I appreciate your ability to do that. You are a wordsmith and an English major, as we've previously pointed out.
Thank you. Very kind. You saw the screenshot that my mom sent to me. on Super Bowl Sunday, just out of nowhere. She thinks I'm some degenerate gambler. I don't know why. I think it's just because
Well, look at who you hang out with. I mean,
I
that could be
guess
a factor.
there's been zero inclination or inkling for her to say like, oh yeah, he's a gambler. But I just get a text from my mom on Super Bowl Sunday saying, please don't bet. Okay.
The best part about this was when you screenshot that and sent it to me. I am not exaggerating, not hyperbole, nothing here. It was quite literally like 10 seconds after I had just bet on the coin flip of the Super Bowl. And then I get a message from your mom saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't bet. I'm like, sorry, I'm hammering tails right now. This is not, maybe the timing on this was poor.
No, it's just ridiculous from her. Absolutely ridiculous. All right, Taylor, let's go ahead and get to some bets, some winners. We will do get in my belly. But Taylor, what I need some help from you on is just a refresher on last week. I think you went 1-2. Remind me again.
Correct.
Iowa -8 against Ohio State. Did that hit or no?
That did hit. The other
of course
two.
It did. Ohio State sucks.
I have I might as well just bring it out now that we're on the subject. This was going to be one of my good things, but did you know that every team in the Big Ten currently has a win streak against Ohio State basketball?
Like they've won at least their last two against them?
Their last one. Every team has won their last game against Ohio State. That's rough. And when
I would not have guessed that.
When we talk about this time of year and we talk about like quad this, quad that, whatever, Ohio State's still a quad 1 win, but they are horrible. I mean, same with like North Carolina is a quad. Yeah. So it's like, I think what people don't understand is how many teams there are in college basketball. There's 375, give or take. So break that into fourths, right? Well, that's only about 9. Like there's still 90 teams in quad 1 in theory, right? So it's not like, oh, great, you beat the 87th best team in the country, and that's supposed to be something good for you going forward. That's just in layman's terms. That's not exactly how the quads work, but I just think it's funny that is such a big deal where it's like, oh, yeah, 17 quad 1 wins. They beat North Carolina and Ohio State and Clemson. And it's like, yeah, okay, these teams aren't even that good. That's what UCLA is holding their hat on right now. It's all these, is like the 3 quad 1 wins that they have. And that's why they should be the 1 seed.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting nugget against Ohio State. I cannot believe that they're considered a quad 1 win, but I'm glad you brought that up. And that's the other thing I can't stand that go into these seedings is like the net and KenPom, and someone's like, "Yeah, Ohio State's still pretty good in KenPom." Like, dude, I see what I'm seeing. All right, I see that they've lost 13 of their last 14 or something crazy like that. They're not a good team. They are not an NCAA tournament team.
Well, and the net has its flaws too, because right now the net has like St. Mary's still like the 7th best team in the country. And it's like, I physically have watched them lose like 8 games this year. Like, how can you can't say?
Yeah. And I don't think they give Providence any credit either. That's one of their crying points over there,
right.
The Friars. So we'll get into all of that, but sorry. No, you're good. Iowa -8 against Ohio State, of course, does hit. Purdue -1 at Maryland. They got smoked. I was actually on a plane. I was on a plane for that one, but they rebounded nicely. Purdue did after that game. And then Milwaukee +9.5 against Youngstown State. You weren't the only one that was like, this is crazy, but yeah, they got smoked.
So clearly it wasn't crazy. So yeah, just smoked. Famous last words from me in regards to Purdue last week when I said, there's no way they can lose another road game. Yeah. Whoops. My bad.
Because Kevin Willard loves Along Came Polly.
Yeah. Wow. Is that 3 references in this program alone?
Not enough.
Not enough. Well, should we get back on the 3-0 train here then, Sub, or what?
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to put my money where my mouth was 20 minutes ago, and I'm taking Texas Tech. We're keeping that train going. Texas Tech +2.5 on the road at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's terrible. We don't need to dive into this matchup too much more. Oklahoma's bad, as we've previously said, and Texas Tech's on a roll. So that's pretty much all my reasoning into that. So we're gonna roll with that on that one. I'm gonna take this to the skies, Sue, and we're gonna go with the Air Force Falcons hosting Fresno State. Just a 2.5-point favorite. The Air Force Falcons are, and Air Force is actually a sneaky decent offensive team. They guard the perimeter decently well. They have one of the best perimeter off or 3-point defenses in the country. And Fresno State is horrifically bad on offense. I think they're 355th in points per game, 351st in 3-point percentage. So for Air Force to be just a 2.5-point favorite, I see Air Force winning by, I would say, I hate to say this, but I think a significant amount there. To me, I've watched Air Force a handful of times this year, and I've watched Fresno actually more than a handful of times this year. Fresno's terrible. And Air Force actually, they're like I said, they're sneaky decent offensively and should be able to run a team like Fresno out. And number 3, we're going to go with, back to the Big East, we're going to go with Xavier at home over Villanova by 5.5. I have been trying to hang on to this thought that Villanova was going to at some point get better and better, and they just haven't. And I think, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, if not more, if you were smarter than me, you realized that this was not ever going to happen. But for me, I hung on a little bit. I think probably because of the brand, hung on a little bit. But, knowing Sean Miller as well as we do, this is often when his teams start to turn it on, especially defensively. This Xavier team is not your normal Sean Miller team because they're really good offensively and not as good defensively. But as we've seen in previous years with the Sean Miller coach team, this is about the time they start to turn it on. So I'm going to roll with that. So Xavier by 5.5, Texas Tech within 2.5, and Air Force by 2.5.
I love that. A lot of what's the comp I'm making here? A lot of the coach from Smart Guy, the basketball coach from Smart Guy. No, a lot of Anthony the Hammer Williams from Smart Guy in the head coach for Fresno State.
Shout out Mo Tibbs.
That's right.
Let me ask you, when do house parties start? If you really know Mo Tibbs, you'll know when house parties start.
Is it the crack of dawn?
No, they don't start. They don't start going till 10. Till 10. Okay.
I think also the Smart Guy High School, I think the mascot was the Penguins. And last week we talked about Youngstown State, the Penguins, who, by the way, great season for Youngstown State.
What a missed op. No, what I should have. That's on me. Hand up. Like, that's the fact that there was a Penguin opportunity. We didn't take that or run with it, whether it being a bet or with Smart Guy. That's totally on me.
Yeah, we went with Morgan Freeman last week. But all right, I like these bets. Let's see if we can get back on the 3-0 train. Taylor, time to get on out of here with some good things. What do you got for me? I'll edit this.
Hang on. Sorry. I had to pull up a new one because we had said the Ohio State thing earlier. So my bad.
All good. Let me just edit it or make
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'll pull it up.
That's fine. I'll go. All right, Taylor, time to get on out of here now, though, on some good things. I'll start this time. Hofstra, first in the Colonial. Yes, they are higher than College of Charleston, who I said I would like to see as a bubble team get in over the likes of a West Virginia. I know I also said something along the lines of even Clemson or Seton Hall. Not Michigan, though. I don't want to see Michigan. I don't know if they're on the bubble or not. Get Michigan out of there. Michigan State, though, I like Michigan State. Get them in. But again, this is all narrative driven. That being said, getting back, Hofstra, what a great year they've been having. And I think it's always cool, that added layer of the hometown kid, of the alum. And that's what we got. Speedy Claxton. He is at Hofstra, the head coach. And again, there was so much fanfare around Charleston and how they started the season. No one's realizing that Hofstra is in first place right now. I feel like if you asked a lot of folks, they'd say Charleston based on how they started. No, it's Hofstra. And Speedy Claxton, he's the one that actually put Hofstra on the map for me when it came to college basketball, because I'd never heard of them. I don't know where Hempstead is in New York, but Speedy Claxton got drafted, I think, by the Sixers. I could be wrong. Someone check me. He got drafted to the NBA. He's a Hofstra guy, and I don't really remember him all that well in the NBA, but I do remember, like, you associate Hofstra basketball with Speedy Claxton. And so I'm glad that he's back and he has them in first place, and I hope they win the Colonial. Again, I don't want it to go without really hammering home the point that nobody talked about them. And actually, there was another team that was talked about far more, and yet Hofstra right there. How about Speedy Claxton and the Hofstra Pride? Hoping to see them finish out the season strong. That's a great thing for them.
Well, mine is a little less good, let's call it, than that. Mine has two things for Purdue, a team that we've talked about a lot, and a team that's projected to go far in the tournament. There's a reason I say that. Hang on to that thought for a second. The good thing with Purdue is that they now have a winning record against every team in the Big Ten in their career or in history. One of the, as much shit as we've given them from time to time on this program, and as much joy as I've kind of gotten out of their basketball as well, I've always been a big proponent of them. They still are probably one of the most underrated basketball programs in the country. Most people don't know that they have the most Big Ten titles. Now, hopefully more people know that they have a winning record against every team in the Big Ten. That's pretty impressive if you look at all of the teams in the Big Ten, obviously. So my funny thing with Purdue, though, is this is just a story from Reddit. So I'm just disseminating information. I have not fact-checked this other than reading through the entire thread about it. And it seems to be legit. So Matt Painter apparently has a condo or something in a tropical location. And a guy on Reddit has rented this from him the same week every year for the last like 3 or 4 years. And this is in March. Let me just preface this reminder. This is in March. Apparently, Matt Painter canceled their reservation last week because someone's going to be using it personally. Is it going to be Matt Painter? Is he canceling a reservation at his condo in like Florida or the Keys or something like that because he thinks they're going to lose? I don't know. Just something to think about. This is deep dive information here.
Wow. Maybe is Painter just trying to go reverse psychology here? Like if I take it off,
or it's
the
probably
market,
like his sister or parents or something that wanted to use it. But
I mean, that's
I don't
way
know.
more logical, but let's put the tinfoil cap on.
Yeah, I like the tinfoil cap of saying, maybe he knows something that we don't at this point. So now I'm hesitant to take Purdue.
Wow. See, that's really good insight. I personally think it's because he's like, look, something's got to change. Let me take this off the market and reverse the juju. Now, obviously, I don't expect him to throw the season, especially when you got a guy like Zach Edey and the roster that he has and the resume that they've built, and it's just Matt Painter. But I genuinely think he's like, you know what, screw it. Let's just take it off for March. Maybe get people distracted on something else.
I am so looking forward to this being the first year that I don't take Purdue to like the Elite Eight or Final Four, and this being the piece of information that has me take them out in the tournament early, and then this actually being the year that they do go to the Final Four, and I just hate myself all the way, big circle of hate for myself just because of all of this.
Purdue, Arizona, Tennessee, the PAT. I brought this up, I think, with Dallin Cuff. One of those three teams is going to make a deep run and probably go to the Final Four. I don't want people to just say, oh, I can't take Arizona because they choke in the tournament. I know they do. Or I can't take Purdue that far because they always choke in the tournament. Obviously, that has been the case. I can't take Tennessee because Rick Barnes and the Vols can't play offense and they choke in the tournament. One of those three teams is going to be there towards the end as we approach April. I'm just letting you know that it's which one do you pick?
Until Hofstra comes outside of that bracket, of that like lower left bracket, as Shark would say. Can't wait for that. Those teams will all be together in the same, and then like Hofstra will come out. It'll be great. Super. It won't be stressful at all for any of our fanhoods here.
Yeah, it'll be Hofstra in the Final Four. It'll be Kansas in the Final Four. It'll be one of those three teams that I just mentioned, and then West Virginia, if we circle it back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the program. Taylor, let's go ahead, get on out of here, though. Thank you, as always, for listening. We want to make sure that you enjoy the hoops and enjoy the rest of the week of college basketball. We should have a really, really fun guest for Thursday's episode, so stay tuned, and we'll catch you next time here on Theater and College Hoops.